Greetings ladies and gentlefish, and welcome back to yet another review of a French tank. I'm so sorry, I know this is the third one in a row, but that's just the way these things go sometimes. We are looking at the Tier 9 light tank, the AMX 1390. So once again, give a little bit of a historical rundown, though this is going to be very similar to the rundown for the AMX 1375. The AMX 13 was a proposal for a lightweight tank that could be airlifted in and would support paratroop regiments. So you obviously needed a lightweight machine. The emphasis was not on armour at all. The idea was that it would mount a 75mm gun and, like I said, support the paratroop regiments. This tank was manufactured in large numbers and exported to many different nations, and the AMX 13 ton light tanks actually during the 1960s they were upgunned, at least the French ones were upgunned from 75mm guns to 90mm guns, which is where we get the AMX 1390 here in game. Somewhat ironically, given that the AMX 1390 ammunition loadout in game is 2 lots of APCR and some heat, historically one of the reasons for trying to upgun to a 90mm weapon was to be able to use the heat ammunition that came with. So it's a little bit odd that in game we don't actually get the option to do that. Nonetheless, in-game, what is it we actually get? Well, let's just start by having a very quick look at the grind for this machine. So this comes on the French light tank line, of course. So if we have a look at this, in the low tiers, of course, you've got the Renault FT at tier 1, who cares? Then the tier 2 French light tanks tend to focus much more on armour. Ditto for the tier 3, the AMX 38, and the AMX 40 there at tier 4. The first proper light tank we get is the AMX ELC BIS, and even that is a bit of a weird machine with that 90mm gun and the turret that, assuming you have that gun at least, doesn't fully traverse. From tier 6 and upwards though in the line we get these auto-loading machines, able to do a lot of burst damage and sacrificing perhaps a little bit of mobility in order to get that, and things like accuracy and whatnot. So we've got the AMX 12T here at tier 6, which is when I played it anyway, and bear in mind that was before patch 9.18, before they made the changes to the light tanks, that was a fairly comfortable tank to play. 1375 here at tier 7, again, when I played it, it was a fairly comfortable tank to play. Since then, they've effectively buffed it as they bumped it down a tier and didn't actually... Well, they didn't bump it down a tier, but they changed the matchmaking so that it effectively got bumped down a tier. Without it really getting any significant nerfs. You then have the Batchat 12T here at tier 8 that I'm not really going to comment on because I haven't actually played it. I ground through this line before they introduced this tank, and of course the AMX 1390 here at tier 9. In terms of modules to grind out, we are going to have the stock gun. This is the 75mm gun. Well, it's a bit of an oddity, because if we actually have a look, strictly speaking, this is a different gun to the gun you get on the AMX 12T, the Batchat at 12T, I'll get my words right, despite the fact that it has the same penetration and the same damage and all that stuff. But for some reason it's a different gun, because of course it is, why not? The top engine is unique to this tank, I'm afraid. The top radio is used on a whole variety of different machines from tier 6 and upwards, so you will probably have this already unlocked. I would say, personally, that you want to prioritise getting the engine before the gun, because whilst this gun isn't fantastic, I played the old AMX 1375 when it used to have 170 penetration, and I can tell you that that is, while not spectacular, it is enough for a tank with this mobility and this matchmaking. You can make this gun work. Obviously you do want the top gun, but you can make that gun work, so I would prioritise the engine above the gun personally, and then of course you get to grind out the 260 odd thousand experience for the tier 10 machine. So, what do we get with this tank? Well, it's a light tank, so it wouldn't be hugely surprising to you to learn that it gets 1200 hit points, which for tier 9 is not very good at all. It's a light tank at the end of the day. The armour, I will go through it in a moment. On the hull, 50, 20, 15. On the turret, 40, 20, 20. My armour use efficiency on this tank is 0%. 90%. I don't think I've ever bounced a single shot with it. The armour is nothing for you to pay much attention to. It is, well, the AMX 13 was supposed to be a 13-ton tank. Of course, here we have a bigger gun rather than the 75mm gun mounted on it. So, in my configuration, this is actually a 15-ton machine, 470 horsepower engine, giving it a specific power of 31 horsepower per ton. Top speed going forward, 64 kilometers an hour, 23 going backwards, and a decent traverse speed. Mobility for this tank is not a problem. It is perfectly fast enough for pretty much whatever you would want to do with it. Camouflage rating, stationary 32.6%. And of course the same for moving because it's a light tank, and that is without firing the gun. If you do fire the gun, that drops down to 7.76%. These are decent camo ratings, I feel I should point out, for a tier 9 machine. The French light tanks do tend to be quite sneaky. View range, and this is where we get a little bit of a disappointment actually. The base view range of this tank is 380 meters. We're at tier 9 now. 400 meters is kind of par for the course. 380 is just bad, and it means that even though I have a half decent crew, though they're not amazing, but they're halfway decent, vents and optics, I still only get a 427 meter view range, which is slightly disappointing. In fact, if we just have a little look at the tank, and we just have a little bit of a play around with it, if you're interested in getting a pimped out view range on this thing, assuming you're running optics and not binos, so optics, vents, brothers in arms, you're still only at 436 meter view range. You've still not hit view range cap. Let's throw recon in, and suddenly you're above that magic 445. Situational awareness also takes you above that 445. So if we get rid of brothers in arms and we go with recon and situational awareness, that gives you above that threshold. So what I'm getting at is the view range on this tank is so uninspiring. Assuming you're not using binoculars and not using a food consumable, you need either both of the view range skills or brothers in arms and one of the view range skills in addition to vents and optics in order to hit that view range cap, which is a bit disappointing. Just for the sake of completeness, let's imagine that you were going to use a consumable, so let's shove some coffee in there. Now it becomes a rather different kettle of fish. You're at 445 with just your optics and your vents without recon, brothers in arms, or situational awareness. So this is one of those few situations where I am actually very much going to recommend the food consumable, especially if you don't have a completely pimped out crew, because this is a light tank at the end of the day and you would like to squeeze out as much view range from the thing as you possibly can. So just a little point of interest for you there, though we're going to come back to that idea a little later on. So that's the spotting. Let's have a quick look at the firepower on this thing. Well, you've got two guns available. I'm not going to spend much time talking about the stock gun because, well, you're going to upgrade to the 90mm gun when you can. 90mm autoloader, 4 shells in the magazine, 2.21 time for loading 1 shell, 23 seconds to load the magazine, 205 penetration, 248 with premium ammunition, 240 alpha damage, 0.38 dispersion at 100 meters, and a 2.7 second aiming time. Couple of quick things to note about this. Firstly, 0.38 dispersion is deeply mediocre. However, when patch 9.18 rolled around and they changed all the light tanks, a lot of them got hit really hard in the face with the "you're not going to have any accuracy" bat. The French AMX 1390 not so much. So while the 0.38 dispersion is not good, it's just about enough. You know, it's workable. You can deal with it. Another thing to note is the magazine or the intra-shell reload time within a magazine is 2.21 seconds. The aiming time is 2.7 seconds. Yeah, that's not optimal. So that is something worth bearing in mind. Within a magazine, you will load the next shell before your gun is fully aimed, which can be annoying. Also, you may well see some replays or whatnot, older replays from the AMX 1390 where it seems to have 6 shells in the magazine. That is the pre-patch 9.18 AMX 1390. Over the course of the patch, essentially what happened was they removed 2 shells from the magazine. However, They buffed the gun handling, they buffed the penetration, and you got a better magazine reload time. So personally, I find the post-patch gun much more comfortable to work with, though I do know some people who still miss that 6-round mag. Let's have a quick look at equipment and crew skills and things like that. So, equipment-wise, okay, Tier 9 you probably don't want to be using binocular telescopes anymore, despite the fact that you have pretty poor base view range and they would significantly improve that. Coated optics are a thing you want. I mean, you are a light tank, so whilst that doesn't mean you have to spend all of your time spotting things, being able to spot things is quite a good plan, so I do recommend coated optics. A vertical stabilizer I also very strongly recommend. Improves your accuracy on the move. It used to be the case that this tank couldn't actually fit a vertical stabilizer, and so you used to have to take an enhanced gun laying drive instead, but a vertical stabilizer beats the gun laying drive hands down, so I do recommend that. Third equipment slot is a bit of a debatable point. You have an enhanced gun laying drive, which would help with the fact that within your magazine your gun loads faster than it aims. That would assist with this problem. And then you have vents, which would help with the whole our view range is a bit naff thing. I personally have vents for the all-round buff to the tank, including view range, but you could argue the case for a gun laying drive instead. Aside from that, there isn't really any equipment that I think is worth going for. Of course, you do have improved equipment, so you've got improved versions of the gun laying drive, the vents, the vertical stabilizer, and the optics, if you wanted to go for any of those, if you have the bonds to do it. I don't. If you do, and you like this tank, then you certainly could. Ammunition-wise, as I mentioned earlier on, this tank is a little bit weird in that historically it was given a 90mm gun at least partly to use the heat ammunition, and in-game we don't have any heat ammunition. So I have got 2 magazines of premium APCR ammo with 248 penetration, and then the rest is 205mm of penetration. One other thing that happened to the AMX 1390 over the course of patch 9.18 is the ammunition capacity went up a little bit, which is nice. Something a lot of people don't realise, but it is quite nice to have. High explosive, 90mm high explosive, tier 9, not really all that fantastic. And whilst they did increase the ammo capacity on this tank, the ammo capacity is still pretty naff. And you probably don't want to be wasting any of your magazines as high explosive, so I do not recommend taking any HE. I've found, generally speaking, the 205mm of penetration is perfectly sufficient for most situations. I have got your standard set of consumables here: first aid kit, repair kit, manual fire extinguisher. Now, first aid kit I do recommend, repair kit I do recommend, fire extinguisher, this is where it starts getting a little bit debatable. As I mentioned earlier on, the base view range of this tank is not fantastic, so you could actually make quite a strong case for using coffee on this machine. Does the tank catch fire, I hear you ask? Occasionally, yes. We're going to get into module, well, I'll mention the module locations in a moment, but for now, suffice to know, this tank does sometimes set on fire. Yeah. So it may even be that you want to swap out your small first aid kit for strong coffee, but with artillery splashing you and stunning you, I'm not sure that's the right way forward. I think ultimately that's going to come down to a matter of personal preference. Try them out, see what setup you think is optimal. In terms of crew skills, nothing hugely surprising. Sixth Sense on your commander. Repairs is not a bad crew skill to go with. You already have very good camo rating, so adding on to that is not a bad plan. Other skills that are of course important, I mentioned the view range skills, so recon and situational awareness. If you're not running the food consumable and assuming you don't have the improved equipment, you're going to need at least one of those, plus Brothers in Arms, or alternatively both of those skills, in order to hit your view range cap. You'll notice my tank, for example, does not have the view range cap. It has 427 meter view range, and that does get irritating and does limit the capacity of this tank as a spotter. Things like Jack of all trades that rely on your tank getting shot up a lot are probably not worth bothering with. What is worth noting here, however, is that your commander performs the role of commander, radio operator, and loader. Now, there are no loader skills I'd particularly draw your attention to. Yes, your ammo rack does occasionally get hit, but not really often enough for me to recommend you taking safe storage, and certainly not on your commander or your crew. Act as a loader if memory serves on this tank. So I've got 6th Sense camo, and I'm currently working on Brothers in Arms. You also want to give priority to things like situational awareness and recon. Unfortunately, there's quite a lot that your commander wants to learn. Gunner, have a quick look at his skills. Again, he counts as a loader in addition to the gunner. Once again, I've got camo, snapshot, and then I'm working on Brothers in Arms. I would say they are the 3 you want to focus on. You don't get any vision range enhancing skills for your gunner, clearly. Deadeye could be interesting. Armourer, I wouldn't bother. Designated target, maybe, but quite situational, and probably not the sort of thing you want to rely on too much. And then over here, I actually have off-road driving on my driver here, just to buff the mobility a little bit. Then camo, then Brothers in Arms. You definitely want smooth ride at some point as well. You could probably forego the off-road driving in order to get smooth ride. I was basically, when I put this crew together, I was trialing out off-road driving, so I'll leave that up to you. Preventative maintenance, your tank does catch fire occasionally, but I probably would not bother with it. Clutch braking, you turn fairly well anyway, so I wouldn't bother with that either. In terms of gun depression and things like that, you get 6 degrees of gun depression, 12 degrees of gun elevation. Worth pointing out, your gun elevation is horrendous over the back of the tank. 12 degrees isn't great anyway, and that's only over the front. Over the back, it is absolutely atrocious, which is something worth bearing in mind. With all that said and done, oh, there's one more thing I wanted to quickly mention in the garage, just to say this thing, rear-mounted turret. There isn't really much room for all the things you might necessarily expect to have in the rear of the tank because of the rear-mounted turret, and that's where a lot of your crew are going to be. So you have a driver over here, and then over here on the right-hand side of the hull, as you look at the tank, this is where, off the top of my head, I believe your engine is situated. Certainly there's either an engine or a fuel tank there. You can get set on fire to shots from here. Your engine does occasionally get knocked out in this tank, and it does occasionally set on fire. There's also fuel tanks at the back, which are nice and flammable. Ammo rack locations, there's one towards the rear of the hull, and there's also an ammo rack in the back of your turret, so those things are worth bearing in mind. Let's go and have a quick look at the armor profile, and then I'll show you some gameplay then. Okay, before we get into the armor proper of this tank, I just wanted to quickly mention the gun depression and elevation. We said in the garage it was 6 degrees of gun depression and 12 degrees of gun elevation. It is 6 degrees of gun depression all the way around the tank. In terms of gun elevation, that 12 degrees, which just to point out is bad gun elevation, that 12 degrees is only to the front of the tank. Around the rear of the tank you get 7 degrees of gun elevation, which is horrendous. So, that said, let's have a quick look at the armor profile of this tank. Not going to spend long on it. It is a light tank at the end of the day. Rear of the turret 20, rear of the hull 15. HE rounds can and will penetrate you. Rear side of the turret 20, side of the hull 20. Once again, HE rounds can and will penetrate you. Front of the turret effective 40. Front of the hull effective 20, 30, 40. Maybe 50 if you're really lucky. Once again, high explosive rounds can and will penetrate you. This tank does not have any armor. It hates artillery, it hates high explosive rounds from any other tank, even if your caliber gun is not that huge, and it's especially vulnerable to something like the RU-251 that really likes to load those high penetration, high explosive rounds to deal with enemy light tanks. That wrecks you. Although, of course, you have an autoloader to try and deal damage back to him, but once your autoloader is empty and he is not dead, he can still kill you, so that is something worth bearing in mind. And that is about all there is to say about the armour on the AMX 1390. It sucks. First match then, here we go, AMX 1390 obviously, tier 9 match. Again, as usual, there'll be a top tier game and there'll be a bottom tier game to give you an idea of how this tank performs in each setup. We are here on Erlenberg, and this is an assault match. We are on the attacking team. Now, usually I recommend, if you are on the attacking team, you push down the 1 and 2 lines. On this particular occasion, This is something I sometimes do if I'm in a light tank. I instead go down the 8-9 lines to around about this location here and see if I can spot out anyone who is crossing over the river towards the 9-0 lines. As it is, instead, I get a bit caught out by an AMX 1375. Put 2 shots into him, take a couple of rounds from him, however, and he does goofed. And our challenger picks up the kill on him, reloading the magazine. And you can see there, 20 odd seconds to load a complete magazine is quite a comfortable amount of time to be able for that to happen. Generally speaking, it means that if you get to a spotting location with your AMX, your gun will be loaded by the time you get there. And that's one of the things I found really frustrating about the old gun, the old magazine on this tank. With around about a 40-second reload, goodbye Mr. Tiger, it meant that it would take you, say, around about 20-25 seconds to get into an aggressive spotting location, but if you found yourself in trouble, you couldn't shoot your way out of trouble because your gun would still be loading at the time, and I used to find that very frustrating. Anyway, we managed to spot out an RU-251 and that Tiger as well, and so currently we're up to 1,524 assistance damage, and we've also managed to put some shots into an AMX 1375 and execute a Tiger 1 for a grand total of 972 damage. We don't stop ourselves, however, eating a, well, it could have been worse, I guess, a 128mm shell from that tier 9 waffle thrower. So we are now on 250 health, not that far into the game, which is a little bit suboptimal. Go for a reload on the magazine there. With all these auto-loading tanks, if you're in the process of going somewhere else and you are not expecting to have to do any fighting for a short while, then I think it's worth going for a reload so that the next time you do get into a fight, you can be at optimal combat effectiveness. The problem, of course, is if you get caught out on your way to somewhere else. And that's when the really long reload on tanks like the old 1390 or the Batchat 25T or the AMX 5100, that can really be a problem and can really catch you out. Anyway, I've decided to come around to the other flank here. The 9-0 lines were getting a little bit hot, and generally speaking, if you're on the attacking team and you're over on that side of the map, your guys will be outnumbered. You know, I'd already managed to put in some damage on some light and heavy tanks and a tank destroyer, and managed to get a good amount of assistance damage onto them as well. Then decide, you know what, actually I'm going to come back, because it seems our team had successfully pushed around and wiped out all of the enemy who were on this side of the river. I'm also letting our team know that our KV-3 is AFK, by the way. Oh yay. So I want to not just rush pell-mell across the river at A5, A6 and get myself killed. That doesn't seem optimal. Instead, I decide, right, I've put myself at risk at the beginning of this game to try and get my team ahead. So now I'm going to see if I can support some of my teammates and let them take some of the heat, because I've only got 249 health remaining. And ultimately, you're in a light tank. You have to remember that you don't have much health. You don't have any armor at all. You do, to a certain extent, have to use your teammates as shields. You want to go in and assist your teammates when the bad guys are distracted with them. Hello, RU-251, you kind of done goofed with that. Avoid his shot, put one into him, not able to connect the third shot. And even if I were to try and engage that guy with one shell left in the magazine, I'm not taking him down. So instead, I go for the reload and hunker down behind this house for a short while. And the reload is already half done. And I decide to move forwards to try and get back into the action as soon as possible. And my magazine should be loaded once again when I do so. Scoreline is 7-4, by the way, so I had a reasonably competent team in this particular game, which does of course help with any of your matches. Side of a Tiger 2, one shot. Take that one blind, no idea if it actually hit or not. Looks like it might have done though. And that's the sort of shot that would have been more difficult. Going for another reload, by the way. That's the sort of shot that would have been more difficult with the old gun, because with the dodgy shell velocity, it just becomes that little bit harder to lead your shots. So, reloading the gun once again, we've currently got 1 kill, 1748 damage and 1524 assistance damage. If we were to explode right now, we'd have still had a respectable game out of it. Not the best, but respectable. Tiger 2, not really paying any attention to what's going on. We get a high damage roll and are able to kill him. T-54 Mod 1, and our Oni decides to give us a nice shunt from behind. And we managed to put a shot into that M53-55 as well, picking up a little bit of assistance damage on him and on the T-54 prototype as well. So that's 2 kills, and we're up to 2,500 damage done. Scorpion G and 2 artillery left, so this shouldn't be particularly taxing. Of course, we could still die here. I mean, I'm not saying that we're invulnerable. At the end of the day, you're in a light tank. Death is always a friend you have to get used to. And the fear of death is something you should be acclimatized to. But we're going to go in, try and spot these guys out, and see if we can get any more damage ourselves done as well. So that's an M12. We put 1 shot into him. Second shot somehow misses. There's that French gun handling for you. That shot misses the Scorpion. Yippee-ki-yay, isn't it fantastic? Little bits of assistance damage there. Oh dear, only 1 shot left in the magazine at the moment. Struggling with the gun depression, and managed to finish off that M12 just as the Scorpion executes our WZ-131. Reloading the magazine here, picking up some more assistance damage as we do so. Going for the ram there on the GW Panther, but our team finishes him off before we can do so, and that is the match. So, let's go and have a look at the results for this one. That game ended up being enough for First Class Mastery, Spotter, Fire for Effect, and Bruiser Ribbons. 3,114 damage done. We did connect the blind shot on the Tiger 2. 3 kills, 1,149 base experience, and of course, in addition to that, just over 3,000 damage and 3 kills, we also picked up 2.3k assistance damage. 19 shots fired, 15 hits, 14 penetrations. About half of the damage was done from long range, about half of it from close range. 4 hits received. None of them bounced. That's the sort of thing you should expect. In fact, 4 hits is more than you would usually be able to take, because I had a light tank shooting me. 6 enemy vehicles spotted, 8 damaged, 3 destroyed, 4.5 kilometers travelled. And yes, although it was a tier 9 match, we had a decent game and we still managed to make a 18,000 credit profit, even with a standard account. So no premium account there at all. So there we go, that was our tier 9 match. We're going to jump now into a tier 10 game and see how that pans out. Here we go then with our tier 10 match, and in fact not only is this a tier 10 match, there are no tier 8s on either side. This is one of the 5-10 matchmaking templates. So this is literally the worst matchmaking that you're basically going to get. We're here on the Overlord map, and with both of these games I have quite intentionally tried to choose matches that were not on obvious maps. So everyone knows, for example, that you can get monster spotting games on Prokhorovka, on Malinovka, you know, maps like that. And if I were to show you a match where I'd managed 8,000 assistance damage by sitting in a bush or something, I could show you that, but that doesn't really tell you much about the tank itself. So I instead wanted to show you some slightly more well-rounded games. The other thing, of course, is that since patch 9.18, there has been a much greater, and since they rebalanced all the light tanks, there has been a much greater emphasis on, okay, yeah, you know what, sure, your light tanks can spot, but that's not the only thing they can do. They have guns as well, you know. So I wanted to make sure that you were seeing matches where we do some damage in our light tanks. And right there you can see one of the nice things about having a magazine. We traded 1 shot from the RU-251 for the rest of his health and killed him, which is a pretty nice start. It looks like the enemy team are throwing some tanks over on this side of the map, but thankfully so is our team. We're not just pushing down the beach, which... oh, I am sick of people just going to the beach on this map. Oh, so sick of it. Anyway, I've seen so far count them one game that I can remember playing relatively recently, where a beach push was actually successful on this map, and it was only successful because having pushed down the beach and watched the rest of their team die, all of the remaining enemy tanks who had successfully taken the higher ground then drove straight down to the tanks who were on the beach and drove into them one at a time and died. Had the enemy team had even 3 brain cells to rub together, that would not have been a win, but there we go. Anyway, back to the game in hand. We've so far picked up 1 kill ourselves. Our team has picked up 2 in total. And, whoa, there's a batch at 25T. Now, always bear in mind your clip potential. So, with 240 alpha damage and 4 shells, do a little bit of mental maths to work out what your average clip damage is. I'll give you a little moment to work it out. Have you had long enough? For those of you who can't be bothered, or if you want to just check, it is, of course, 960. So this T49, we cannot clip. And the batch out, I'm just using auto aim here actually, because we managed to change targets, we can no longer clip the batch out either. But there was a time when we would have been able to clip the batch out if we'd landed every shell into him. Going for the reload again. I was using auto aim there because it was there was a lot going on and I wanted to keep a view of the bigger picture while shooting the guys. So I didn't want to put all my focus into trying to aim. And we're currently just using this central location of the map, and oh god, that's a T57 heavy. Oh god, no. I'm currently just using this central kind of caldera area in order to try and put damage onto these guys. We've got, whoa, T57 heavy still over to our left-hand side. We really don't want to get shot by him. That Batchat just got evaporated. There's a Jagdpanzer E100 right at the back of the map. And just going to see if I can put some damage in here. T57 heavy, we put in 1, 2, 3 misses, and 4 just tracks him. That was kind of disappointing, but there we go. Going for the reload, only 2 shells actually managed to do damage. Kind of annoying there. We've taken 1 hit so far, so we've still got 966 health remaining, but of course, remember, this is a tier 10 match. Plenty of tier 10 tank destroyers can still just kill you, even though you've got most of your health left in your tier 9 light tanks. Do be aware of that. Can't shoot the TVP. T57 heavy appears to have gone behind a house. Can't really say I blame him too much, I guess. He's trying to take cover while he reloads. Which way is he looking? Oh, he is burning to death. So rather than forcing the gun depression and possibly getting shot by some of his friends, he was already screwed. Let's just let him burn to death. Type 4 heavy now. We have shots into his side. There's 1 and 2, 3, and 1 more, 4. And we take a hit from the TVP there for 353, but we managed to avoid taking a second hit. 613 hit points left. That was a good trade. We traded 353 damage as he shot us for, well, an entire clip into that Type 4 heavy. Now we did actually roll low. Out of those 4 shots into the Type 4, we rolled, out of an average of 240, we rolled 246, 223, 228, and 213. So we actually low rolled for that magazine, but it was still definitely worth taking 1 hit from the TVP to put that magazine in. Tier 9 Waffle has been spotted just back there. First shot misses. Second shot misses because the accuracy on this gun is not very good. And then we're going to try and put 2 shots into that TVP as we do so. And back off. And we take a hit from the Waffle there. And we actually get finished off by the Jagdpanzer E100. A little bit of a shame, but the game was being rounded out, so I thought it was worth taking the risk. I mean, it was always a possibility that the tank destroyers were going to shoot us there, but I thought it was worth taking the risk to try and put some damage down. Had our shots against that tier 9 Waffle actually hit, then that would have been another almost 500 damage in the bag, but as it is, they missed, and it wasn't. So, let's go and have, once again, a look at the post-game stats for this match. That match was enough then for second class mastery, fire for effect, and bruiser ribbons. 3,210 damage done. The only people who did more damage in the entire match on our team was the enemy Jagdpanzer E100, who has a 17cm gun. The friendly T110E4, who has a 155mm gun. The friendly E100 with a 15cm gun. And the friendly E50M, which has a 105mm gun. So all the guys who did more damage than us were tier 10, bigger guns. You get the idea. Anyway, finished top of our team, 3,210 damage, 1 kill, and 957 base experience. 19 shots fired, 17 hits, 14 pens for that damage count, 4 hits received, 4 penetrations, dead. No bounces. 2 enemy vehicles spotted, 6 of them damaged, 1 of them destroyed, and okay, our repair costs were more significant this match. We did die, so we didn't make as much money, but still a profit from a tier 9 match, which is nice. No assistance damage to throw into that match. That really does help with your profitability, but there we go. C'est la vie. Anyway, that's the gameplay over, so let's just jump back into the garage and have a final think about this machine. So, personal opinion on this tank. Well, let's just have a quick look at my stats in this tank, just to show you. I have played 510 battles in this machine, which is the most I've played in any tank in the game. The reason for that is that when I started playing through this tank, if we just flip back and have a quick look at the tech tree, this was before patch 9.18, the AMX 1390 was tier 8, and from it you could unlock the AMX 30 and the Batchat 25 TAP. So I played it a lot and I unlocked the AMX 1390, and around about that time patch 9.18 hit, which rearranged everything, bumped the AMX 1390 up to tier 9 and put the Batchat in at tier 8. So now I have the AMX 1390 and I had the AMX 13105 to unlock. Now I play this game generally with a standard account, and so after grinding out, I mean, let's just have a quick flick back. The AMX 30 is about 200,000 experience. The AMX 13105 is 261,000 experience. So by the time I have unlocked the 13105, I will have ground out, after unlocking all the modules, I will have ground out approximately, yes, unique, approximately 500,000 experience on the AMX 1390. So let's just put that into some context. That's quite a lot of playing. Now, so what is my opinion of it? Back before patch 9.18, I hated the 6-round autoloader on this tank. It was so unreliable, it was so derpy, the shell velocity sucked, I found it really uncomfortable to play. And so I had a little bit of a break after I unlocked the AMX 30, you know, rather than going insane trying to continually play this tank. Patch 9.18 rolls around, the changes are made to the tank, and I really like the changes. I find the 4-round autoloader gun much easier to work with, and let's not forget it's the gun handling that got better, more ammunition, higher penetration, higher shell velocity. That's a really nice set of things to have buffed about your gun. You lose a little bit of the clip magazine potential, but a lot of the time I found that the magazine, I wasn't using all of it anyway, and I was going for that reload, and it was a very long, laborious reload at the time. So I found the tank much more comfortable to play after the patch. Having ground out another 245,000 experience in it. Am I keeping this tank? No. There are a few reasons for this. One, over the last couple of weeks, I actually have got fed up of playing the 1390. Despite finding it a lot of fun when patch 9.18 rolled around, the more I've played it, the more I've gotten a bit fed up with it. Whilst the gun handling and things like that are better than they used to be, it is still a French tank. The gun handling is still not the best in the world, and the gun has an annoying habit of letting you down really when you need it to pull through. Now, of course, part of that is going to be just how you see it, the perception in your head, but nonetheless, the gun can be unreliable is the point I'm getting at. And so I find that quite irritating. The other thing is the playstyle of the tank. It's become much more similar to the American autoloaders, things like the T71 in terms of playstyle. And I already own the T71, and I've kept the T71, and I really like the T71. And as I already own the T71, the playstyle is so similar that there's very little reason for me to keep both tanks. So I'm going to keep the T71, I'm going to get rid of the AMX 1390. And looking at it on paper, yes, it's only on paper, looking at the tier 10 AMX 13105, I know the tier 10 light tanks have a bit of a dodgy reputation. I mean, for example, just having a quick look at the 13105, the accuracy on the gun is god-awful. But I struggle to see what the AMX 1390 can do at tier 9 that the 13105 at tier 10 can't also do, but probably a bit better. I mean, let's be honest, you get higher base view range, although it's still only 390 meters, which is... This is tier 10 now, people. Come on. Anyway, you have higher clip potential in your magazine. You have higher penetration. You have a better aiming time. I don't know. And apparently, there might be some buffs on the cards for the tier 10 light tanks anyway. So all those things together mean that I'm not personally going to keep the AMX 1390, but it is quite a fun, quite a comfortable light tank to play, especially if you like auto loaders. So you might find it rather pleasant experience, and if you do, then by all means go for it and play it. I've certainly had some fun games in my AMX 1390, and it's certainly not a bad tank. So it's going to come down to personal preference to a certain extent about whether you keep it or not. Whether you do keep it or not, you're going to be playing quite a few games in it if you go up the French light tank line, because, well, it's tier 9. Ultimately, it's not as painful a grind as some of the tier 9 tanks. M46 pattern, yes, I'm looking at you, but you still have to grind out 261,000 experience in order to get your hands on the tier 10. So I would recommend learning to at least tolerate the 1390. But it is a decent machine at tier 9. So there we go. I hope you guys found that review vaguely informative and or entertaining. If you did, by all means feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel. And as ever, I wish you very happy hunting on the battlefield. Ciao, ciao.